Hello everyone, this is Betsy from Ideas Times 2, and today I have a tutorial for you. We are going to, I'm going to walk you through and we're going to make a Coptic stitch book. So we're going to go through the whole thing, not just the stitch, but we're going to do the covers and talk about papers and that kind of thing. So it will be a lot of fun. So just like this one, and it looks like this, where there's tiny braids that sort of go up the spine, or not up the spine, but across the spine, and hold all the signatures together and hold the book covers all together. So let's see. Coptic stitching, this type of stitch, there are many varieties too. Like we could, if you are interested, we could go over a few more types of things like the French link, maybe different looks to it. We could certainly do that too if you guys are interested, but we're just going to go over the basic thing today. So Coptic is from the 2nd century AD, from Egyptian Christians, and they were called the Copts. So C-O-P-T-S, Copts. So their bookbinding method became known as the Coptic stitch, and it's one of the first types of books that was ever made. The Romans did have some triptychs and stuff that you folded, and they were made out of thick wood, and they were bound together with leather cords, and you could fold them. So you know, there are some sort of precursors and stuff, but this is considered one of the very first books, as opposed to using scrolls and long pieces of paper for writing. So awesome. Little bit of history there, very fun. Oh, so you know, I've heard too in our crafting world, some people call this the Coptic stitch or Coptic stitch without the T in it. And in the crafting world, Coptic is a brand of alcohol ink markers. And so that's a different word. This would be Coptic with a T, and it does have a capital C because it's named after a group of people. So just a little fun history there on that. But I love it because of the history and because of the efficiency of the way this works. So it'll be lots of fun to learn how to do that. Cindy and I actually took a class several years ago, and we learned 4 different styles of binding, and this was one of them. So, and now we haven't had anything in our shop like this for a long time, but it has been a while, and so I'm just kind of relearning as well. So lots of interesting things to show you. All right, so I'm just going to go over the basic materials first, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but types of covers. So what I've used is a chipboard, and it's a heavy chipboard. Like here's a plain one, and you can see it bends a little bit, but it's very stiff. So that's what I used on here. These actually, all the ones that I've used are from scraps. So the back cover of a sketchbook is usually a real thick chipboard. I've also had, actually, so this is what the chipboard would usually look like. Sometimes it may have writing on it if you're recycling and reusing. This is, I think, matte board from like professional picture framing. So I had some scraps. This must have been the size of the inside part where they cut out the mat. So I have some matte board, and that's a perfect strength or thickness of something to use for the cover as well. But you can I wrapped my cover in a paper, a mulberry or rice paper. You could use a thicker paper or just a regular type paper to wrap around. You could use fabric to wrap around, or you could just paint the cover. You could collage on the front of the cover. Lots of ways you can do the cover, but typically what I've seen is just wrapping paper around. So that's what I did here. This is, as I mentioned, it's the mulberry, I think it's actually rice paper, and the reason why I used it I've had this for a couple years, this rice paper, and it was so beautiful. I have a tendency to hoard a little bit when I have something that I love and I don't want to use it up. But I finally decided to rip into this, cut into this, and so that's what this is from. But you can just do a Google search or scrapbook.com or something, and you can find mulberry or rice papers. They're just stunning. So I forgot what I was going to say about that. But anyway, so that's what that is. So if you do use, this is kind of a translucent paper. I have a scrap here. And if I hold up this ruler, you can see how translucent that is. So then what I had to do, and especially if this has writing or you're recycling, you're going to need to paint it just so that the writing or color doesn't shine through your thinner papers. Like some papers are not going to matter. If you use a thicker paper, it's obviously not going to matter. But I had to paint mine, and so I have one painted and ready to go here. All right, so that's just a little bit about the covers, and then so you can make it any size. Now the paper, I prefer to use a thicker type paper. So this was a sketchbook paper, and so I think it's a 50-pound paper. This was a little bit more than that. It's sort of a thin quality cardstock, but it's not like super strong cardstock. So these are basically just about the same. I think this is a 65-pound cardstock. So I kind of did two-tone here. Obviously you can make it however you like. You can do this up super fancy, just make different colors. That'd be fun too. I just used gray and white. A lot of times you can just use one piece of paper as a signature, but in this particular book I used 2 pieces of paper as one signature. So I don't remember how many signatures I have, but it's like 15 or something like that. And the neat thing about Coptic binding, as you can see, is it lays perfectly flat. I can just switch to any page and it lays flat. Okay. Even the covers, this will lay flat. So super cool. So anyway, back to the papers. And then I deckled the edges on here, which was a lot of fun. Or you can just cut them to be just a tiny bit smaller than the book cover. And the signatures are not going to be like stuffed full of pages. You're not going to have like 10 or 12 to a signature. I'd say 1, 2, possibly 3 might be the most that you want to do, because just because of the way it's bound and the way it's going to lay, it really works better to have fewer sheets of paper in each signature. So anyway, you can use thinner paper. Just when I make these books, I do prefer a thicker paper, and a lot of it has to do with the pulling and tugging when we bind. A lot of it has to do with that, but you certainly could use thinner paper if you'd like to. Really, there's no hard and fast rule. You could use all cardstock, or you could use watercolor paper. You know, you can mix it up. You can do whatever you'd like on that, but mine is sort of a medium weight paper. All right, and then thread. All right, so I made a mistake on this one. So I'm going to show you what I did on there, but you can use fairly thick, because this braid on the outside is so pretty, and you can use a thicker cord type of thread. I used a pearl cotton in size 5, so it's thicker. I think size 5 and size 8 are the most popular, and this would be the thicker one, so it's a size 5. And I actually got this in a pack. I used to do an embroidery technique that called for pearl cotton, so I used to have a lot of it, but I didn't have any more because I've discovered I can't do every single craft that I love doing. So I did buy these at Hobby Lobby, and there were two skeins, at least 2 skeins, because I see there's 4 yellows, but at least 2 skeins of every color, so I knew I'd have enough to do at least one book. And there is no label on it, but this is exactly what a size 5 pearl cotton floss would look like. So it was pretty cheap, and they were half price. So for $2, I got all these different colors, and I thought that was fun. Plus, I think for our regular junk journals, this is going to be a great binding cord or thread. Okay, so that's what I used on this one here. And I really like the way it turned out, but it is kind of small. You have to sort of look closely to see the braid, but I like it. I like it a lot. I could use 2 strands of that if I wanted it to be thicker. But if you get too thick, then of course it's going to be in between your pages, and it's not going to lay as flat. But it could be, that could be fine. That could be the look you want, and that's fine. But I just chose a little bit thinner so that spine would rest and be flatter. So what I used on this one was sort of the regular spools of waxed linen thread that you buy for our bookbinding and junk journaling. So this is just that regular thread. But I found this to be, and I used 2 strands of it. So 2 strands will get, you know, a thicker cord like that. I'll show you why I took this out and I wasn't happy with it. Can you see? Let's see. Can you see the black marks it was leaving on my paper? So it was leaving black marks like this. I was so unhappy with that. And then also it's just very stiff. So I mean, you can see how stiff it is. It's just like that. And the wax, it has so much wax on it that was sticking. It was sticking to my covers. So, you know, it's not too bad here, but you could even then you could hear the crackling. I'm not sure if you can hear it. Can you hear that crackling? That's from the wax sticking to the paper. So I wasn't super happy with that. So that was a pre-waxed one. But all of these, any cord or thread you choose, you can wax it yourself. Which will make it easier. It'll glide easier through the holes, and it won't get tangled as much. So I think we can go ahead and talk about that. So I quilt as well, so I had this already. It's a little travel size beeswax circle that is in this plastic holder, and so all you do is let me pull this out. All you do is just run the thread over the wax, and then you've got waxed cotton, and it's not as stiff. As you can see, it's not as stiff as that other pre-made one. Okay, so some other threads that you could use would be embroidery floss. You could use all 6 strands. That has a soft feel to it, and I think that would lay flat as well. You don't have to use 6 strands. You could use fewer. But if you keep the 6 strands together, they're nice and smooth looking. So, I mean, I think that would be pretty on here too. So it does depend. Like I did this, and I started out this way because that's just what I had in the house, and I wanted to try it. And I do like, the braid was a little bit harder to pull because I had the 2 strands, so the braid was a little harder to pull, and it's kind of uneven, and I just wasn't happy with it. So I just cut this whole thing out. But this is really nice paper, so I haven't thrown this away yet because I really want to do something else with it. So we'll see on that. I think that's about it for thread. You can basically use whatever you'd like. I chose a thinner one. And like this, I could just double it up and make a nice thicker one if I wanted to. And it is handy. You don't have to, but it is handy to use the beeswax. I have this in my crafting supplies. I have a block of beeswax, which I got at a farmer's market type store. I think you can get beeswax at Hobby Lobby or hobby stores too, but so that works just as well. You can see that I used it for running thread, so that works as well. So I think that's it for thread. And then the paper we talked about, the cover and the thread. Okay, so then the other thing would be a needle. You're going to need a needle. You can use a straight needle, or you can use a curved needle. And I used a curved needle. I had one in my stash, my sewing stash, and I think I just lost it. Oh, here it is, right here. Okay, so here's my curved needle, and this was a joy to use. It was so nice compared to just using a straight needle. But straight needles will work just fine. I made I've made a couple books with just straight needles, but I used this curved needle for the first time this time, and I just love it. And I'll show you when exactly it comes in handy. But all right, so I think that's basically it. You know, you might need to make your covers the same size, you might need a ruler and a craft knife and measure it out and cut the right size. You may need little scissors. Bone folder is very important. I can't find my nice one, so I'm going to be using this one today. Yikes! If you get a chance to get, if you're a bookmaker and you have a chance to get a Teflon bone folder, I highly recommend it. It is so nice, you will never want to use cheapy again. And Cindy, I think in Cindy's last video, I think she said she lost her nice bone folder. Yeah, I did too. I misplaced it. I can't find it. All right, so anyway, so those are just some basic things to use. To attach this paper on, we're going to use PVA glue. So a glue, when making your cover, may also be something you need. So I'm going to set this aside, and I hope I didn't take too much time explaining all that, but it's helpful to know some of that stuff before we start. So I'm going to use a PVA glue, and I'm going to cover. Now, I did film this previously, and I made a mistake on one of these covers. So I had to redo this, but I am going to show you how to wrap these. But for the next part of the video, there's going to be a little break, and after the next video I'll be working with these covers because this is the book I'm actually making. But I'm just going to make this cover with you so you can see how I wrapped this around the cover. So I'm running out of PVA glue, so hoping that this will work for me. So PVA glue is just a thin white glue, and it's archival. So that is a common thing we use for bookmaking. All right, so little left. I have some on order, so I'm hoping that comes in very, very soon. So like I said, I hadn't made a Coptic stitch bound book for a long time, and so now I got the bug again, and I'm super excited about making more of these. And the small size might be fun to, you know, vary it up a little bit with your sizes. So what I'm doing now is taking a brush, brushing that glue into the thinnest layer and the most even layer that I possibly can. And then I'm going to lay my paper over the top. And I really, really need to see if I'm getting this on straight, because that's what I did wrong the first time, is I get it on straight and then totally had to start over again. All right. I'm actually going to put that away because that's kind of getting in my way. Okay. So I think I forgot to say, so this was the mulberry rice paper, and then on the inside I lined it with just scrapbooking paper, or this is actually like a digital page. It might be from Tracy Fox. I am not sure. I don't remember. All right, so there we go. Make sure it's nice and smooth. Okay, and then, so I did cut it a little big. Let me cut this down a little bit. I do have to get to work, so I'm trying to watch the time here. All right, so this paper I cut just a little bit bigger than my cover. And then what I'm going to do is come in and snip off the corners at an angle and leave just enough space so that it's enough to wrap around the depth of your chipboard. So just enough so it wraps around like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and do 2 so you can see how to do it. Okay, and I'm pretty sure you guys all know how to do this. If there's somebody out there who doesn't know, just want to kind of make this an all-inclusive type video where every aspect of this is kind of covered, so you can make an entire book just by watching this one video. I don't know if it'll be 2 parts or not, but if it is, I'm going to publish them both on the same day. All right, so here we go. So all you do then in the corner is, first of all, fold over one of your sides, and see how beautifully this mulberry paper, it's just so beautiful. And then what you're going to do with either a bone folder, or I'm just going to do this with my thumb so you can see it up close to the camera. Just run your thumb or your bone folder and catch that little extra bit that we left on there. Catch that and push it towards the next edge that you're going to do. So that, not sure how much glue I'm getting anymore. And get the edge with glue too, so that when you wrap this over like this, then that little edge that you tucked in will be covered over with the next side. And see what a nice corner that gives you. Also, something else I wanted to mention is with these sharp chipboard edge or corners, what I usually do so that it doesn't wear thin on the corners easily, I usually just snip a tiny bit off of that corner so that it's just the slightest bit of a rounded corner, which I've already done here. And I just take a scissors and do that. So I'm going to do all the rest of this, so it's going to look like that. And the next part of this video, I will be using these covers, but I had to cut off the video because I made a huge mistake. So all right, we will catch you in a second. All right, I'm back with the next part, which would be the papers. These are the book covers I showed you. These are the ones that I had made this one, and I made a mistake on this one, so I had to use some different paper, but I think they look pretty good together still. So here are my covers. Now, the next thing I'm going to do here is to cover the inside cover. So I found some scrapbook paper that I had that I think looks pretty good, and so I'm just going to straight up glue those. And that one's going to have little swirlies at the top, which is fine. So all I do with these, I'll probably use just Fabri-Tac here, since I could use my PVA, but it is honestly, I don't think I have enough to actually do that. So I'll just do one of these covers so you can see me do it, but it's just like I said, it's just gluing it right on. So this is scrapbook, this is cardstock, which I think is great. It is good to have the cardstock, but any paper will do. And I had seen someone who put this paper on after they did the binding stitches, and then it covered up the threads and it made it look bumpy, so I didn't prefer that. I didn't prefer that look. So I went ahead and I did this first, and it'll have little holes punched in it, but I thought it looked a little better. But that's up to you as well. You could make and if you wrap this over farther like this, then you could make your end papers just come like this size. Then you've got your bindings, stitches don't come through this, but it's whatever you prefer. Okay, I won't do both of them, but the other one will go on in exactly the same way. So the next part is papers. So I cut my papers just like 1/8 of an inch all around, smaller than the covers. So it's going to pretty much come right up to the edge, just a little bit of a gap. And I deckled my edges again just because, I don't know, I guess I really liked the way that other one turned out. So let me just show you how I deckled the edges. So it's not, if you're a deckler, a professional deckler, this is probably not the correct way. I don't really know. but this is the way I did it. And also another little bit here about folding the paper. So you will fold it in half, line up your corners as best you can there. And this is the way the professional bookbinder taught us. He said, take your finger down to the center like this, and then over to each side, and then run over that with a bone folder. So that's the way he taught us how to do it. And I think it does make a difference. It makes your papers not go as crooked. Like sometimes you can be perfectly fine in one corner and the other one will get off if you start like this and just run your finger up that way. So just go down through the center and then off to each side, and then bone folder. And using the bone folder is going to make a huge difference. Okay, so then, and I've already got my measurement here. I know how far I need to go over this way. So you make your own measurement. Just make it just like 1/8 of an inch smaller than the width of your book. Okay. Or is that length? Is it length going that way? I think it might be. Okay, so there's that. I know exactly how far. So then all I do, I don't have much room to work with here, about 1/4 of an inch. But that's how the paper worked out for me. So then I'll take it one at a time. Sometimes if I get both of them at the same time, it works just fine. But I sort of prefer, I think I'm making fewer mistakes when I just take one. So I'm holding my ruler in position. This is a metal ruler, but it doesn't really matter. It could be an acrylic ruler, it could be a wooden ruler. Okay, and then so I'm holding that down pretty firmly, and then I'm just grabbing the edge and trying to rip this all in one piece. If you don't, it's no big deal. Just keep grabbing it and ripping. See, there I did that. It makes a little, I'll show you in a second, it makes a little bit of a bump in there, but that's part of the fun of decaling, right? So see, that's where I accidentally ripped it off. But it just makes another little bumpy edge. And then if you don't like it, you can either just cut it, little trim, or just try to rip it off. But if you have to be kind of careful with that, because if you try to rip it off, you might end up ripping the paper, you know, inwards, and you don't want to do that either. So once again, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to hold this up to where I know I need to rip. Okay, so I just have this tiny edge, and I grabbed both at the same time, and it's working perfectly. This paper, this is like resume paper, like a linen paper, and it rips really well. So now I've got both of those, and that's going to be my one signature. I'm going to have 2 sheets, very similar to the way I did the other one. And you probably can't see it too well, but I also have 2 different kinds of paper on this one. So just for a little fun. Okay, so then before, it's awful that you have to stop at this point, but you have to stop at this point and press your papers down. So if you don't have a book press, who has a book press, right? But was it last year? I think last year for Christmas, my sister who lives here, Sue, she gave me this. Now her family is a woodworking family, and she gave me this homemade one. So it's 2 very sturdy blocks of, or I don't know, squares of wood. And then she, or maybe her husband did it, I'm not sure, or her daughter even, put these giant screws or bolt thingies, or I don't know what they are. And so they just drilled holes and put 3 on one end and 3 on the other. So then all I'm going to do is slip my book pages inside of here, and then screw it down to press them. And it should be pressed probably for at least a couple of hours, but I usually press it overnight. And it makes a huge difference, and I want to show you why. So once I got, this was my mistake one, right? So once when I pulled the papers, did I even press these? I'm not sure. I think I did. I pressed them, but I didn't put the folds in far enough into my little book press. And can you see the difference? Like, they're still kind of puffy. Now they do have string in them, I know that, but I was noticing before I even put the string in, how much wider it was on this side than this side. And I'm not, it looks like I'm gripping it. I'm not. I'm just loosely holding it. So the longer you leave it in, this will, you know, compact together, and it should be more of an even text block. So that's part of this. That was part of the reason why this didn't work out well for me. The other part is this, but I'll probably wind up showing that to you later. See that dip right there? This was just a horrible, I just did a horrible job. Now, if you don't have a book press, okay, I mean, who has that? I was just very fortunate. My sister made me one. Just use some heavy books. I have some really giant heavy books, and just put those on top. You know, make sure this is very, very even and together. Make, you know, you don't want them to slide apart or anything. Put your books on top, several books, several real heavy books, or like one heavy book and then put a gallon of paint on top of that, so that it, you know, it's resting on top of the book, and put lots of weight on it. And overnight is great, but several hours is okay too. So that's the hardest part to do, is to wait on that. So we're gonna go ahead and do that, and then I'm gonna have to come back, and then we'll get to sewing. It'll be fun. All right, see you in a bit. All right, done with papers overnight, and look at how nice that is, nice and flat. Just a beautiful block. So it's always fun to see that, how flat it got. All right, so there that is. Now, the next thing to do would be to mark holes, and we are going to mark each piece of paper separately, and we're going to mark the covers as well. So actually, let's do the covers first. For this one, I did have my holes 1 inch apart. So, and they were actually 1 inch from the edge as well, and then 1 inch apart all the way across. So what I did was I made a template of one inch marks. You definitely could use a ruler, a clear ruler or something like that, but I just decided to use one thing for all of my markings and hopefully keep it more consistent that way. So I did this, I made this. So this line here is a 1/2 inch away for punching holes. So the holes in the cover are going to be a little ways away from the edge, whereas the papers, of course, are going to be right on the fold. But these need to be a little ways away from the edge. You can make it a 1/4 inch, you can make it a 1/2 inch. Some people make it even deeper than that, because it's just a decorative stitch on the outside. It has nothing to do with how far it comes in on the paper. So I made mine a 1/2 inch, and I've already marked mine. So I just marked it lightly with pencil. I don't know if you can see that, but I've already marked. But how I did it was I lined up, I had to fold this so I could see a little better, but I lined up that line, that 1/2 inch line, with the edge of my book cover. That is the left side of my book cover. And then I just marked with a pencil just a tiny dot along those 1 inch lines, but made sure that the 1/2 inch line was even with the edge. Okay, so then I did that, and then all I'm going to do is punch it with an awl. And like sometimes, let me see if I can get this here. Sometimes it's easier to sort of hang it off the edge of a very, I don't know, not a huge surface, but just a tiny bit off the edge of this little mat is what I'm going to do. And then I'm just going to punch it as straight down as I can. And then it doesn't have to be a giant hole. You can always make it bigger, but you can never make it smaller. So I'm hanging it off the edge of this little mat, and then just punching straight down. And then poking it in just a tad bit more, but you just want to make sure there's room for a needle and a thread. Otherwise, it does not have to be bigger than that. Straight down. There we go. And then just make it a tiny bit bigger. Okay, so now I've got holes. I will continue punching. There's a couple more, but I wanted to show you how to do the back cover. Is instead of using the paper, you can just directly punch through the holes you've already made down into the back cover. So make sure that when you that you have it right side up. Just tap it, make sure your edges are nice and even. You could even clamp it if you'd like to. Probably a good idea. Okay, make sure it's nice and even, nice and flat, and then go ahead and punch right through the hole you've already made, all the holes. And I'm hanging it off the edge of this little mat again, and just punch it down. And instead of making this hole bigger, you can go ahead and come back through here and make them a little bigger. So once again, just it's all lined up because they're clamped together, and we're going to punch down. And that way our holes are in exactly the same spot. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this punching and make these holes a little bit bigger by going back through on this side, just to make them a tiny bit bigger, like that. So I'll be doing that, and I'll be back in 1 second. Alright, so I've punched my holes there, 1/2 inch from the edge, and then the back cover has been poked as well. Okay, so all done with that. Now we're going to mark the paper, we're going to punch holes in the paper. So the way I do this is using my template again, or you can use a ruler. So I've got my 1/2 inch markings, and I'll take one paper from my stack, and I've marked this. So I marked this template with top here, so I'm always going to operate with this at the top of my book, whether it's going to be the papers or the cover. So top here, I've marked this one as the top page, and this is the top edge of the signatures. Okay, so what I did was I lined this up, and this time I didn't have to use that 1/2 inch mark at all, but I lined this up with my marks. And I'm just going to zoom in just a tiny bit here. Okay. So I'm going to center this up here a little bit more so you can see. Okay, so oops. So I lined this up, and then I made marks with a pencil just very lightly. And I actually am so careful to make it very straight up and down and just make a little bit of a mark. So I did that on this top page. You can see the pencil marks there. Yeah, just a little bit. Okay. All right. So then what I'm going to do, oops, and I have these signatures put together here. Put these signatures together. So with my signatures put together, which I can't remember if I mentioned it, but I was going to do the 2 sheets. Okay, so with my signatures all put together, I'm evening it all out, making sure it's nice and straight, up, side to side. Make sure the folds are down here at the bottom, so you're nice and even. Tap from side to side, make sure it's a nice even text block. I'm gonna clamp these. You can just hold it too. If you have a real steady hand, you can just hold it, but I'm gonna go ahead and clamp these. Well, let me use my strong hand to do that. Okay. All right, then what I'm gonna do is take a straight edge. You could take a ruler. I'm just going to take the book cover. And what I'm doing here is, so you can see my mark here at the top, I'm just going to line the book cover up with that mark. It is kind of hard to show you what I'm doing here. So I'm going to line my book cover up with that mark. Okay, I've sharpened my pencil nice and sharp, and then I'm going to run my pencil straight up from the bottom, straight up on all the way to the top signature, and draw a little line. Okay, see that? So now that has a little line right there, and I'm going to do the same thing all the way across, and that leaves, that in turn, I'm not going to unclamp this all the way because I need to do the other ones, but that will leave a tiny, tiny mark on each fold, and that's where I'm going to punch holes. So this is a quick way and an accurate way to mark the placement of all of our holes so that we get a nice straight line going up. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do all of them, and I'll be back. All right, so here's the fun part. See, all done. Nice straight lines. Now comes the not so fun part, because you have to punch holes in every single one of these. But let me show you how to do it, and then I'll do the rest off camera, and then we'll be ready to sew. So that's the exciting part, and it's fun to see your progress once we get to that stage. So that's fun. Now I don't have like a piece of foam or anything like that, so what I'm going to do is sort of just, and remember this is the top sheet, so that's going to be important later. We're going to try to keep all of these pages in the same order as they are stacked. Okay, so this will be always next to this one will be always next to this one, so we're going to keep this stacked just like we have it here, just the way we marked it, which is kind of an important thing for accuracy. We want to just remain as accurate as possible. So these are two sheets together, and at every little mark I'm just going to put punch a tiny hole, and as you can see I've got it raised up a little bit so I can punch through and try to go as straight up and down as possible. You might need to get your head over it a little bit. I'm trying not to do that so you don't see my beautiful head in the camera. Okay, so there we go. So now I have holes punched, and we're going to do each one the same way. So this is my top, so I'm just going to go ahead and lay it upside down in front of me, and then I'll take this one, punch my holes, and then put it on the stack on top of the other one, like that. And do the same thing with all of these till I have my stack, and then when I put them back together again, I've got my top here, and it'll be important later, so keep them stacked in the same exact way. So I'll punch my holes. Hello there. I thought I would go ahead and split this video into two parts because it got to be quite long. So in the next, this is the end of part 1, and there's only one more part, so part 2 we'll actually get into the stitching and attaching the covers. So I hope you join me for that so that you can complete a book. That would be awesome. So I will stop talking and end the video, and please join me in part 2. Thank you.